Welcome to the November edition of the Cerini Nonprofit Connection. Today we have as our guest Nicole Epstein, Associate at Gotham Government Relations and Communications. Welcome, Nicole.
Hi, thanks, Ken. Thanks for having me.
This is awesome. I'm really looking forward to this
Yeah,
one.
I really appreciate this.
So, Nicole, before we get started, can you talk a little bit about what Gotham does with the nonprofit sector and how you help them?
Yeah, of course. So, Gotham, our company, we represent, a wide array of companies, businesses, associations. However, I have to say, we're most proud of our work for the nonprofit, charitable organizations. And, working with these nonprofits, we've really found kind of our own niche here, where, for example, with schools, with, nonprofit special education schools, whatever it may be. And, through working with, professionals like yourself, who really help us do our job, we've really been able to kind of expand our business in this particular sector. And it's definitely our most proud work. And again, it's work that I feel as though a lot of lobbying firms, I don't want to say overlook. It's, usually wouldn't be your first thought process, but for us, it's really been a great niche because we love the work, honestly.
So you do lobbying for nonprofit organizations and other types of communication. Is it typically just lobbying or is it other things too?
So lobbying is really, when you think about the word lobbying, you have to think about what is that, right? So lobbying is really a full comprehensive strategy. Okay. So you always want to get somehow from point A to point B. So lobbying is really harnessing, in a very particular way to advocate for whatever it is in your organization's mission, right? So you want to be able to push the purpose and the mission of your organization in front of elected officials, in front of policymakers, whoever it may be. But another equally important part of that is the communications part, right? So you want to make sure that your organization's story is told and told to the right people, and your story narrative is loud and clear. So whether that's working with the press, okay, inviting, so communications is such a big part that they're both interconnected. And a lot of people don't know that, right? So you want to make sure that whether it's engaging with your local news station, reporters, whoever it may be, it's just as equally as important because the both are so intertwined.
So it's really then your communication with the public sector, which would be your lobbying component, and your communication with the private sector through press, public relations, press releases, and all that other stuff.
Exactly. And, also, and you raised a good point, is that you have to think about it. So even if within your nonprofit is going to be serving other, very, businesses with similar interests, so you want to make sure that you are making those connections and that you are finding out, okay, where is my base of, people who are interested in my nonprofit and interested in the services that we offer, and make sure that you really branch out to that base as well.
One of the things that I don't know, I'm sure you see it too, but we see it all the time, is that the governmental agencies, funding sources, and everything else, they have a responsibility to the nonprofit sector to do things the right way. But unfortunately,
everything the right way.
But unfortunately, they're in a situation where sometimes they don't see things as clearly as we all feel that they should, and it takes a lot of I don't want to say complaining or whatever, but going back to them and saying, come on guys, you got to help us here. Come on guys, you got to help us here. And a lot of times our clients can't seem to get through to them. So they reach out to someone like you to help. How do you find that organizations, funding organizations kind of respond to you, and how can you really make a difference kind of in that relationship?
It's a great point. It's a great question. So, the first thing for any of our nonprofit clients is that we always want to make sure we hone in on the exact request. What is it exactly that you're looking for, right? So when you go to elected officials, you have to remember, first things first, is that I find, from my experience, I found out that a lot of our nonprofit clients, or really any client, it's a very intimidating process when you think about, reaching out to your elected official or senator this one, or assemblywoman this, or governor or mayor. It's very intimidating. So I think the first boundary is that we have to make sure that everyone has to realize it shouldn't be. Okay. So the government works for you, right? So when you go to them, you want to make sure the key point is, like you said, you complaining. But really what it is honing in on your data, honing in on exactly what it is, right? You want to be very concise. And when you do meet with these elected officials, you want to make sure there's always a main goal here, right? So the way I look at it is that when you go on these meetings, you want to always try to find your champion. Okay. So with that, what does that mean, right? So when you go and meet with various elected officials, some, aren't going to understand, okay, like you're saying, because the biggest part is that we're educating the elected
Okay.
officials. That's the key, is that they need to be educated. They're everyday people just like you and I, and they don't know maybe this domain, whether it's a special education school, whether it's a museum, it could be anything. It's an education process. And, again, it's communication's key. Just like your normal business, normal relationships, how you would speak to your husband or your wife or your brother or sister. You want to stay
I don't
focused.
know that.
Okay, actually, that's actually probably a bad. But what I'm trying to say is that they're everyday people, these elected officials, and they want to learn. So again, it's always to make sure that, and again, it's persistence. So in the beginning, you brought up, constantly complaining, whatever it may be. It may seem as complaining, but I look at it as persistence. And that's really what will push your organization over the end. You want to make sure the elected officials know exactly why your organization is important to their constituents.
So when you go to talk to an elected, do you talk to the elected themselves? Do you talk to one of their aides? I mean, does it matter?
So it all depends, really. So I always think that, especially for nonprofit organizations, since they are always providing these services, right, that are so important, these charitable organizations, that I look at as, there's a multi-strategy prong here, is that you want to invite these elected officials, number one, to as many events that that your organization actually hosts. This way they could see, up close and personal, the great things and the impact your organizations, has on their constituents. So for example, we work with a lot of special education schools. It's really rewarding. Okay. So you can go in and meet with an elected official, a staff member, whoever it may be. Okay. Because the truth of the matter is, this is a little insider tip here, is that a lot of people think, okay, if you don't meet with the senator himself or the assemblywoman himself, what's the point? But just, like any other business, if you think about it, they rely on their staff, okay? Because they're only one person, just like any businessman or anyone. So when you are meeting, if you are meeting with a staff person, they're just as equally as important, because guess what? They're the ones who are advising the senator. So yeah, of course, do you want to meet with the senator or assemblywoman or governor, whoever it may be personally? Of course, but I always do caution that don't be discouraged if you are speaking with a staff member, because they're just as equally as important in the whole grand scheme of things.
Okay.
And again, I just really can't stress how important it is. And from my experiences, when you invite these elected officials to your events to come in and observe one of your classes or whatever it may, it really goes such a long way. That's how you really change someone who's just excited about your organization into a champion of your organization. So that's always the goal. You want to find your elected officials who are going to be your champions, who's going to go out there and gather on your behalf support from the other elected officials. Okay, that's what I mean by a champion here.
Right. Okay.
It makes it much easier for everyone.
I think also one of the things that organizations need to do a better job of, I think a lot of times you find that organizations will reach out to an elected official when they need them, instead of developing a relationship with that elected official so that when they need them, they're already there.
It's such a great point. That's like one of my biggest talking points for all of our clients, is that just thinking about it, you want to really harness this and really build upon this relationship. You don't want to, exactly as you said, you don't want to just go to them when you need something, just like a friend, right? If you think of it like that, you wouldn't just want to have a friend that you go to when you're in an emergency circumstance and otherwise you don't hear from them or talk from them. It's not as meaningful. This way, when something goes wrong, you're not wasting time at starting from square one, right? You're not wasting time educating, finding your champions, mobilizing, because this whole thing of really, like you're saying, this ongoing relationship, it takes organizing and mobilizing, and it has to be done from the beginning. Because again, I'm not saying it comes off bad when you just go for someone, in an emergency circumstance. Sometimes it happens, but it is so important. I'm so happy you brought that up, to start from the beginning, start inviting them to your events, be out there with them. This way, when you do need something, you'll be on the top of their mind.
Now, does it make sense because I mean, you've got a whole bunch of different issues to think about here. You've got different levels of government, you've got bipartisanship, you've got who's in office this month versus next month. So how do you develop a strategy on, who do you go after and who you talk to and who you get to be your champion, and how do you pre-identify?
Exactly. So of course, so the first thing I do with all of our nonprofit clients is always want to figure out, the first question I say is, I want to know exactly who you're serving. Okay. How many people are you serving? Where are they located? Because when you think about this, the elected officials, they obviously represent their district. Okay. The people who voted them into power. So you want to make sure that you want to focus. If you have an organization that, let's say, a lot of the people who, participate are located in a specific town, first thing is you want to go to whoever that representative is, of course, because they want to make sure that they're seen with their constituents, especially if you're an organization that's changing their constituents' lives for the better. They want to be a part of that.
Right.
And also, something that's also very important is that I find that sometimes it's hard to accept, but some elected officials may not get it, right? So they may just not be.
Really?
Yeah, right? It's hard to believe that. It's real. Imagine that. As crazy as it may seem, and your organization can make so much sense to be doing all these wonderful things, some electeds just may not get it, as horrible as that sounds. So to me, what I always suggest is you don't waste your time. If someone is a clear no, okay, if an elect, clearly they're a no, they don't get it, they're just not interested, move on. Okay, you want to focus your time on changing those maybes to yes and those yeses to the champions, really.
So what's your role in this whole process, or what's Gotham's role in this whole process in terms of trying to grease the wheel, or kind of create this fluid where,
Yeah.
do organizations typically come to you and already have the political people lined up, or do they not have the political people lined up, or where do you fit into this whole process?
Sometimes they think they do, and then in reality, we find out that maybe that relationship wasn't as strong as they had hoped it was. So where we really come in on this is that, again, when you look at lobbying, it's two things. We plan the strategy, we execute that strategy, and there's two different things here. It's organizing and mobilizing. Okay, it can be very overwhelming. You don't know where to start. You have your own organization to run. Okay. So what we do is we sit down, we look at exactly who are you serving? Where can we go? We'll set up a lobby day. What that means is, can you come up with a bunch of your members to come to the Capitol in Albany to meet face to face with various elected officials? We'll start a letter writing campaign. We'll draft the letters. We really make sure that the pressure complaining is on point all the time. So you can't let go. We really focus that.
So when do they bring you in? Do they bring you in when a problem comes up, or do they bring you in before a problem comes up? Or is it an acute relationship where they're there to solve a problem, or is it just an ongoing thing forever?
So that's a good question. So we have a wide array, right? So of course, there's certain clients that no matter how many times you tell them, it's much better to have this ongoing,
like the chiropractor that readjusts you on a regular basis.
Exactly. This ongoing relationship with the electeds that we can constantly harness for you and educate them, with your help, obviously. But, then again, we do have some, clients who, after they truly understand that value, right? So most of the times, a new client will come because they're in a situation. They either need critical funding and they need it fast, or they need a policy changed, right? So they'll come to us for that. And then afterwards, once they see it in action, then most of them actually end up becoming long-term clients because they see the value in that. They see the value of always being engaged. Not everyone's like that, but that's definitely the way to go.
Yeah. So again, something you just brought up, and we see a lot of instances, especially in today's environment in the city, Suffolk County, even some in Nassau County, where the funds just aren't being released as quickly as they should be. Bringing someone
Shocker, right?
Bringing someone like you in can kind of help to release those funds faster, and how?
Yeah, exactly. So that's like one of our that's actually why we get called a lot for, and it's sad. It's not sad, but government isn't as efficient as they should be. So there will be money that is held up, or for example, tuition payments that, a school can't function, for example, right? Receiving their payments from the government months, sometimes a year after the services are provided, especially a nonprofit organization. So
Right.
That's where we come in to make sure that again, we know, so like you're kind of bringing up before, there's multi levels of government, right? So for example, we would know, us being the experts in this, okay, there's the different branches. You have the executive branch, right? So are we looking at the division of budget? Is that where things are being held up? Is it maybe perhaps state ed that's holding up, holding it up there? There's so many different things. And that's where, a nonprofit organization, doesn't have time to, kind of figure this out. And it's something it's hard to figure out unless you're in it. So that's where we really guide and make sure that pressure, I can't say this enough, that the pressure is always applied. Who cares if they think you're annoying them? That means you're doing your job.
Right.
Okay. Because that means that you are there. They know you're not going away. And that's what a true advocate is at the end of the day. If you just say one thing and then don't follow up, guess what? Government doesn't want to hand over money. Who does? Like they don't
Yeah.
they don't want to hand over their money. So we make sure that they don't have any other choice, because sometimes you have to be annoying enough that it does happen like that.
What about, do you work with, I know there's some, again, dealing with the public sector, there's like legislative grants and legislative funding that might be available.
Yeah.
How can you step in and help organizations with
That's
that too?
a great point. So that again goes down to, so elected officials are going to give or want to support, again, organizations where they see it's making a big difference in their constituents' lives. So for example, you represent a nonprofit museum. This is like a great example for strategy. There, we invited, this museum, although it was a local museum for, a specific county, it doesn't mean that there aren't people from across the state that come, right? So whenever they would have, like, let's say, an exhibit or some type of event or fundraiser, we would make sure that those elected officials, a whole, wide cast of them, are always invited. This way they're coming, they're seeing firsthand. This way, when you go to them for that specific funding, this is another important thing. So yeah, of course, I'm sure any organization can think, oh, I can do a lot with $1 million. I can do a lot with $500,000. The way it works, with the government is that you have to have a very specific request and a very specific purpose, right? So we make sure that we hone in on that, because the elected officials want to know, how is this money that we're going to give to you, how is this going to really impact? What project is it going to go to? Is it going to get you a new HVAC system? Is it going to allow you to expand the building? Is it going to allow you to hire more professionals to, expand your programs and services? So that's really where we come in. And luckily through that ongoing strategy and campaign, we've been very successful in being able to obtain a substantial amount of money for these organizations.
So from a lobbying perspective and a lobbyist perspective, you also help with messaging and
Oh yeah,
positioning and developing impact studies and all that other stuff.
100%. Because sometimes what I find, just like in any career, is that you can be, when you're very close to your organization, you're the expert, right? So you have all this information in your head and you're so excited and passionate about it that you want to get out everything you can when you meet these electeds, especially if it's your first time. So we do, again, it's so important to be concise. You have to remember, elected officials are just everyday people. Some of them have a very short attention span.
I'm sorry, what?
Like a very short attention span. So it's that elevator pitch. You want to make sure that, again, it is so concise, and that when you leave, and we prepare these, materials, because again, we call it a one pager in the industry, right? So you might have like a pamphlet of 10 pages going, okay, chances are they'll look at the first two, if that. You want to make sure you have bullets, and at the end, a very clear request. And then you want to make sure you leave them some materials if they want to read it on their spare time, okay? And then you want to make sure you follow up, again, on that specific request. So we make sure that it doesn't become, that's, I guess, something I've found out a lot, is that you can't just jam all the information, because it all gets lost. If you focus in, and that's what we do, we develop that strategy, that communication strategy. We make sure also by using that with the press. I can't stress how important the press is. Using the press to your advantage, okay? Because hey, you never know who's watching.
Right.
If you have a strong, story out there, a really moving story, usually, from the people who are actively engaged in your organization and are benefiting from your services, that's the most powerful form of advocacy out there.
Right. All right. So we'll get to the press, because I think that's
Yes.
another part that I really want to kind of focus in on as part of this. But I just want to ask you one more question, maybe about the lobbying component and stuff. So when you're kind of looking at this, what's the role of the organization and the management of the organization, and what's the role of the lobbyist? And are there distinct roles that each of them play, or is there kind of a blurring of the lines between the two?
So you mean like working
Yeah,
together?
yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, typically, so that's actually it's depending on the size of the organization, right? It depends. Okay, an executive director, the program coordinator. So depending on the specific need, because every organization has very unique needs, that's where we work together. And we really, we work with whoever, the I guess the executive is to basically point us in the right direction of, okay, well, if I need this information, who am I going to? And then we're also working with other professionals that aren't within the organization, like yourself, for example. I mean, you and I have worked together on, and half the projects I know that you rely on that other aspects expertise, just as, you would rely on us. And it's so intertwined. And I think, the organizations, of course, they're just as intertwined because they're the experts.
right.
They're the ones who are the boots on the ground. They're the ones who are, who know everything. So it's really, it's, and again, for example, a lobby day. We went to Albany, and had a lobby day. And to us, we love bringing our clients with us. We want them. Some lobbyists are different. Some lobbyists, rather, do it without their clients there. We personally feel it is so important to bring your client with you to meet with these elected
I
officials,
agree.
because why not? They
And
want.
it's not just the clients, it's actually the consumers or the families or the,
Exactly.
yeah.
I'm so happy you said that. Exactly. Who are you making a difference in whose life? That's who you want, to come. Whether they can't make it to Albany or they can't make it to an elected official's office, they can write a letter. They can pick up the phone and start a phone campaign. And it's that constant pressure, that constant mobilization.
I think one of the things when you watch any of these reality TV shows, I'm sorry to move to a reality
Oh, it's
TV
a
show,
yep.
but if you watch any of these reality TV shows, I mean, one of the things they do is when you have
Guilty pleasure.
the different contestants on it, they give you kind of a little background of the contestants, and you get to see a little bit into their history and their family and everything else. I think the same thing works here in terms of what you're talking about by bringing, the families and everything else, and
Right.
the electeds can see what that family looks like and how the impact that the organization is making. And they can start to get now that connection to the organization, which I think is important.
Yes, that's like such a great example. We had a lobby day once where we actually had at least, I think it was 30 or 40 students from the school actually come up to Albany with us, to walk around the halls of the Capitol and to meet with the elected officials. And that was one of the most rewarding and really priceless moments, I think. And you could just see the look on the elected officials. I mean, think about it. The elected officials are talking to adults all day, and people like that. But when they get to really see how excited, whether it's a kid or an adult, whoever it is, really, when they get to see firsthand the excitement on their face and the passion and how excited they are that this nonprofit organization was able to provide a service for them that they didn't have before, and that it's really making a difference in their life. I mean, just like human nature, that's the most powerful thing you can do. It's, and again, strength in numbers. I
And,
mean,
and,
think
and
about it.
and you kind of serving as the quarterback of making all that happen.
Oh,
That's
that's
pretty
it.
cool. Yeah.
Exactly. Organizing, it's a lot, and again, you want to make sure that your time's used efficiently. You don't want to go to an elected official where chances are they're not going to be helpful, or, whether it's a political reason or, there's tons of reasons. And that's where we come in, because we make sure that this is everything follows a very tight line, and everything has to be on strategy. It has to be focused. We make sure that it remains focused and that we're targeting the right people, the right, stakeholders, the right decision makers, and also other, interests, other associations that, you guys could really work together on. So that's really where we come in to make sure that the messaging is out there and correct and focused.
Okay, so let's go back to the communication side that we
Yes,
started
I
talking
love
about.
it.
So on the communication front, I mean, one of the things that you talked about is, getting that messaging out, utilizing the press. Again, I think what a lot of organizations find is it's really, really difficult to get in the face of the press. It's really difficult to get press releases picked up. how do you kind of pave that way, or how do you, what tips can you give to an organization
Yeah.
in terms of getting their information out to the press in an effective way that is going to be a real story?
Exactly. So, you always want to think about it when you're watching the news or anything like that. You know the type of stories they put up there, right?
All negative.
I
When was
know
the last time
it's
there was a positive
horrible. It's
story?
it's really horrible. However, sometimes, randomly you'll find one of those feel good
Oh, the
stories.
random act of kindness.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. They have to. I feel like, imagine if it's just doom and gloom all the time. So you really want to make sure that if you're going to invite the press, you want to invite them to a really impactful event. Okay. So where do you go? So let's just say Long Island. Okay. Let's say you're a nonprofit organization that serves a lot of Long Island kids, adults, whoever it may be. Obviously you're going to want to focus on, there's the print, so are you looking at Newsday? Are you looking at, the Long Island Press? Are you looking at camera? Okay, so you have to think also, how would my story be most effectively shown? Is this something that you would typically read in the paper? Is this something where the visuals are so strong and compelling that it should be on News 12, or it should be on FiOS or CBS or ABC? So you really want to think about that. And again, that's where we come in, because through working, for so many years with so many organizations, we know all the reporters on a very personal basis, where we could instantly reach out to, if you're in we know the education reporters, for example. You're not going to just go to, a transportation reporter on that. So that's where, we come in. And also, if you think about it, it's unfortunate, but, they're also on a tight line, the media and the press. They're making cuts and things like that. So they also want to work with people who know that, it's credible, that, plan it out for them, help them make their jobs easy. This way they want to cover your event. Tell them an exact time. Make sure you send out a press release, a few days in advance, a media advisory a few days in advance. Make sure you're calling them. Make sure, making a list, and, let's say if someone doesn't come, then send them the photos afterwards, put some quotes in there, things like that. But that's really where we definitely, one of our strong points, without a doubt, is utilizing the press.
So you're talking about now a proactive utilization of the
Mm.
press, but you also are in situations where you have to react.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So talk a little bit about that reactive process and how you go about doing that.
Yeah. So yeah, those are always fun, right? You get that like panicked emergency phone call at like
Because
3 a.m. and you're,
I mean, part of the issue that I always have is you're kind of walking this tight line, because you got some negative press, and if you respond to the negative press, does that now spur more press on the negative press that maybe would have gone away if you did nothing?
I am so happy you brought that up, because I cannot tell you how often this happens. Okay. So let's say, just because, and I get it, it might seem like the ends of the world, right? If you have, if you hear a little blurb, or have, see your organization or company on a news article or on TV, right? And you're like, oh my God, we have to do something now. We got to send out a massive press release.
I was going to say, I can tell you there was just and I work a lot in the special ed area, and there was just an article written up in the Albany area, and it was a kind of a scathing article on 4410 preschool area.
Mm.
And it's all news that's like a year old.
Oh yeah.
And you sit back and you're like, you want to respond to it, and you want to say,
yeah. I mean, sometimes, and we always use this term, you don't want to add air to the fire, right? You don't want to,
fuel to the fire.
there we go.
Yep.
That's it. You don't want to just keep adding, sometimes it's not, I get it. It seems like a big deal. It seems like this is the end of the world, but you know what? Guess what? Tomorrow there's going to be a new story. 5 minutes later, there's going to be a new story. So sometimes when you're focusing, maybe the other, maybe CBS, for example, didn't pick up on a little story that, ABC. So to kind of alert the whole press sometimes, to something that you don't want to bring attention to, isn't the best way to go. So you have to think about it. Okay. And, is this something serious enough? You really, that's where we come in again. Is this something that's not going to go away? Because then you have to address it. Okay. Right. And you have to address it in the correct manner,
To what extent though, do you, play for the press to position yourself for something that you may need to deal with a governmental agency, or deal with lobbying, or deal with, where you're able to then, because of the negative, you have to kind of respond to it, because you're going to need to kind of nip it in the bud somewhere else.
Exactly. So again, it's so intertwined. I mean, the power of the press can't be, it's can't stress that enough. All right. So the elected officials are always looking at this stuff, right? So, you really want to make sure that, again, you're connecting the two. Okay. So you want to make sure that, yes, you have to nip some issues immediately. Okay. You want to issue a statement, sometimes you just want to issue a concise statement addressing the issue. Or maybe sometimes, guess what? Some reporters, I feel don't do their homework fully. And it is important to get out there and to correct, especially mistakes, or if there's, things that just are not true that are being reported, then yes, I do believe you have to get out there and you have to make sure you clarify it, of course. However, sometimes, again, you would like to believe, this is actually a great point. Before something, if you know a bad story is going to come out, right? Sometimes you just know it's going to happen. You want to get in front of it, right? So maybe you don't want to go and amplify it by having a press conference, right? And having the whole press come. But maybe you want to pick up the phone and call that elected official and be like, and let them know, explain to them, listen, this happened. This is why it happened. And make sure that you get ahead of it, because you never want to have them, an elected official or anyone, a constituent or, a member of your organization send you something and say, hey, what's this about? I saw this on the news. You don't want to make it seem like you're hiding anything.
You mentioned a good point. You mentioned that there might be times that you are aware that an article is coming down or some press is coming down and you want to get ahead of it. Because a lot of times somebody will call up
Yes.
and ask you for a quote about something. So all of a sudden you know that there's something happening here. What should an organization do if somebody calls them up and all of a sudden they're being asked for a quote?
Great
And then
question.
the second part of that is, how can they kind of get ahead and maybe provide fact pattern that can kind of squash the whole
I'm
thing?
so happy you just said this, because I can't tell you how many times, let's say you get it's intimidating. You get a phone call, right, from a reporter. It probably doesn't happen every day, like we're used to it, but for most organizations, that's definitely a rare occasion. And what happens is, you might panic, and so a reporter could ask you a very pointed question. I always advise you do not have to respond immediately, okay? Because that's usually, you want to think about it. Sometimes people don't realize whatever you say on the phone or email, even if you're just reacting straight out of emotion, they can run with that. Okay, so I can't stress enough how important it is. If you get a phone call, you just say, okay, let me get your name and your phone number. Try to get as much info as you can, with the reporter, especially if you have a relationship with them, and say, okay, we will call you back. You usually want to always find out what's their deadline, number one. Is this something that you need to respond to in an hour? Maybe it's a week, maybe it's a day. And then go back, and think about it and speak to the other members of your organization, other professionals you work with, and formulate a very well thought out response. Because you don't ever want to just say something where afterwards, happens all the time, you're like, damn, why did I say that? That does not, it's not what I wanted to say. And then it's too late.
Yeah.
The press, that's what they want that. That's what they're looking for. They want to catch you off guard. They want to catch you in that moment, thinking that you don't know. It's okay to say, I'm going to call you back, within the hour. And that's my biggest tip of advice, I have to say.
That's some great advice.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So we're going to, because I like to change gears
Let's
a
do
lot.
it.
2020.
Yes.
Big election year.
Yes.
So what should organizations be thinking about now moving into a big election year? Does that change their positioning with stuff? I mean, again, everybody wants to get elected. So everybody seems to be a lot nicer in election years.
Oh, isn't that funny, right?
So what should organizations be doing this year or next year, 2020, to kind of position themselves appropriately?
I mean, during an election year is like a great question, because when it's an election year, this is a great opportunity for charities, nonprofits, to really capitalize and take advantage of this moment. I cannot stress that enough. Exactly for the reason you're saying, they seem to be much more nicer and open to. Of course, you want to know why? Because guess what? They know
they want your vote.
They want your vote,
and they
right?
know that you have a block of people who you can influence.
Exactly. So you want to make sure that, again, the elected officials, they do appreciate their local charities. Okay, that goes without saying, of course. You're making their constituents' lives better. You're making an impactful difference, right? So again, this is a time you want to capitalize on this. So remember now, they want to also be seen more, okay? So especially if you have an organization with a nice member base, okay, or if you're a school, you know, any school really, these electeds, they are looking for these opportunities more than ever now to come and be visible, right? They want to make sure that their constituents see, here I am,
Shaking hands,
I'm
kissing babies.
shaking. Yes, I know. It's
Or is
exactly.
it kissing, hand, shaking babies? Whichever.
Yeah. But they want to make sure that they're there. They want to make sure that they're seen. Here I am, you know, think about it. Do they want to be seen, you know, with the big corporate, you know,
Yeah.
billion-dollar corporation? No, okay, not now. Like, they want to be seen with their local charities. It's those are the people voting for them. So again, I can't stress, you want to make sure, invite them to your fundraisers, invite them to your events, because chances are they're likely to go now more than ever during election year.
Okay.
Again, it's all about being seen.
So now is when, if you don't have relationships with
Oh,
electeds,
yeah.
you should really be starting to create
Oh,
those relationships with
you know,
electeds.
it kind of sounds like, you know, scratch my, you know, what is it? Scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. They want to see, you know, yeah, it's helping you out, right? Because you have them there. Now they're learning, you know, hands-on about your organization, right? It's helping them because look, here I am, you know, with this great organization making a difference. So they're going to find time. So whereas before they may not have had time, quote unquote, for something, you better believe they're going to find time now.
I guess here on Long Island, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
And maybe even New York City, it's a little bit different because we pretty much know how the voters vote
Yeah. Oh,
in
yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
most of
I
the
mean,
time.
things do
But I
change.
guess the question is, you know, when you've got these elections, how do you know who to invite to your event? How do you
Mm,
know which party or which candidate, or how
that's
do you make those decisions?
that's a loaded question, Ken.
Sorry.
That's a loaded question.
Oh, so you
Um,
feeling a little hot over
so
there?
yeah, so I mean, think about it. You don't want to leave anyone out, right? Okay, but you know, again, especially if you have, let's say, a pre-existing relationship, obviously that's where you're going to
Yep.
want to go. Okay, but you know what? I think also you want to have an open invite. Why not? You know, have an open invite. But again, if you know certain elected officials, you want to do your homework. Okay, so like certain elected officials have their interests, you know, that they're very passionate about. So certain
Well, you've
electeds,
got different committees too, and you got to know who's
exactly.
sitting on which committees.
Yeah, the committees do change sometimes,
Yeah.
but that's very important. And also think about it. If you know a lot of the elected officials, some of them were teachers in the past, principals, whoever, you know, they're usually very more inclined and in tuned with the educational sector. Okay, so you want to try to also find and, you know, do your
Understand
homework.
backgrounds.
You
Yeah,
want to do your
understand
homework.
backgrounds.
I mean,
Okay.
that's where we can come in and do your homework. You know, if someone, it's clear that they have no shot, you know, pie in the sky chance of winning, chances are you're not going to focus your time on them,
Right. Okay.
you know, but you do want to be fair and outreach to as many as possible. Because again, let's say even though your organization's located at a very specific address, guess what? We represent so many clients where the members that are a part of those organizations come from all over New York State. You know, so you want to reach out to those as well. You know, so you really have a wide array, and you know, you never know what's going to happen with the elections. Sometimes you're likely to figure it out, so you want to focus in
So,
on those.
so you said several times, do your homework. So when you talk about doing your homework, maybe you can expand on that a little bit more. I know that there's certain information that nonprofits should be pulling together in terms of, and you mentioned a couple times, you know, where their members are from or where their constituents are
Mm,
from, or what sort of homework or what sort of information should they have available to actually help you do your job
no.
more effectively, and even if they're not using a lobbying company, to be more effective in their communications with
Oh, I mean, like I
electeds.
said before, the first thing we get down to is I want to see where your members or whoever it is, where are they coming from? The numbers. Again, I can't stress like how important it is to have understand that there's strength in numbers. Okay. So granted, think about it. Okay, let's say you have 100 kids, right? But guess what? You're not only impacting those kids' lives, you're impacting their families' lives. Okay. You're impacting so many different organizations as well. So that's where, for that, when we talk about doing your homework, to have that info ready, let us know where is our army at, I guess we could really say, you know, where can we get those people that not only you're going to help me organize it, okay, but now I need to take that to mobilize it,
So
right?
when we look at Army, we're looking at then not just the constituents, we're looking at the volunteers, we're looking at
Oh
the
yeah.
employees,
Oh,
we're looking at
I'm
the,
so happy you said that. Of course, they're so important. They make the dream happen, really, the boots on the ground. What a better way also exactly have their employees talk about it, especially they're passionate. I mean, they're your best. I say this all the time. Our clients, to me, that's why I always want to bring them and do bring them to these meetings, because you guys are the best advocates. Of course, yeah, we help craft that message and get your story out to the key stakeholders and the key decision makers, but you're the experts, you're the real advocates. The children, that the lives that you're impacting, that's what they want to see. That's what we hone in on. You want to use also, it's the age of social media. You want to use that to get your story out as well. So we really make sure that that's tailored and that it's all connected. And then sometimes you learn that there's some people in your organization that you wouldn't have thought, are really, you know, feel very passionate about something. And, sometimes you find out just by simply starting to do your due diligence as to pulling together all the facts.
at what point in time, or is it important for an organization to take an inventory of who their contacts are
Mm,
through their board, through their employees, through their families that they
so
serve, and
great.
everything else? Kind of an inventory of what political contacts they have, what press contacts they have, and everything else. Because I don't think a
I
lot of
love it.
organizations actually do that.
You know what? That's like a really great question, because I found that, certain lobbying firms, the government relations firms, we're very different, that, they don't like sometimes when, sometimes you do get an organization who's very politically active, or like you said, their employees have, or family have connections, or, know this elected or that elected,
But I,
right?
but I think at some point in time, unless you ask the question, how do you even know that those
Ex-
connections exist?
exactly. So that takes communication, finding out, and again, that is something that you need to capitalize on. Whereas some people might say, they don't want to, but us, that is one of the first things we look for. We say, who do you have any political allies? Whether it's your family member, whether it's this one, that, because you want to, hey, listen, more the better, right? So if it's anything that we bring to the table, anything you bring to the table, now we're really working
Yeah, that
here.
intensifies it.
It
Yeah.
intensifies it. We welcome that. That is one of the first things we look for. We're not gonna, some organizations might want to shut that out, but no, we really want to capitalize and enhance that relationship for you.
Okay. Um, what if you can kind of go back and kind of think about maybe what we talked about now, or even some other things? What advice? What's the key pieces of advice that you would give to nonprofit organizations who are looking to either get deeper into the press and do more, get more effective press releases or more effective communication and open up the doors to get more communication with the press, or to start kind of a lobbying campaign or a lobbying? What advice would you give? I know there's a
Look,
broad open topic,
yeah,
but
yeah, that's a big question. Well, again, I think it comes down to, well, I keep saying it, but focusing in on that message, right? And really, again, not being, I can't stress this enough, not being intimidated. Okay. You really have to understand, that these elected officials work for the people. Okay. And guess what? They do get a lot of their information from the press, So, I guess really starting a whole campaign is that you want to really come, my ideal situation is when a client comes to us with a very, with a problem and says, okay, this is how government assistance in this domain will solve this problem. Okay. And this is how many people this will impact. And this is how many lives it will change. And again, organization's key. You got to be organized, Okay. So you also want to make sure that the biggest events are what you're going to have a press conference on or a press release on, right?
Mhm.
Of course, yeah, there's always good things happening, but you want to make sure that you kind of really keep your messaging tight and concise, okay? You want to make sure that there's those key things that are always on top of everyone's head. So I think, I guess for an overall strategy or campaign, you want to, the first part is finding out exactly who's willing like I said, who's willing to go to a lobby day? Who's willing to get on a bus with 40 people, from your organization, families, this and that, and go to Albany.
So again, it's going back to that inventory we talked about before, and
Inventory, it's so
understanding
important.
what's available and what resource you have.
It's so important. Like, I can't stress that enough. And again, not being scared to use the press. This is another thing. A lot of people I've found, through our experience, are scared in a way to use the press, because sometimes, guess what? I mean, the truth of the matter is it's going to happen where you can go so far, right? You can push an elected official and a message so far and say, listen, Senator, we don't get this, $50,000. Don't you understand? All these kids are going to be
Displaced,
or they're not going to have a program, or we don't get this $2 million. These services that, have made a difference in their life are going to be gone. And sometimes you get to that point. Or, for example, if we don't get this money, our school is going to close down. This is stability. And sometimes I think it's so important to understand and be scared when you really know you're at the end, it's not going anywhere. You can't be scared to kind of use the press to call them out. Hey, again, the government works for you. The government works for the people. I know and that's what I think puts our firm a little different, is that we're not, sometimes if you're at that point in the road, just like, you have to just call them out. Put put their hands on fire. Yeah, you got to, though. It's important. And I think a lot of people get nervous. I've experienced that, hey, listen, I don't want to anger them because maybe I'll need them in a month. Well, you're not going to need them if your organization's shut down, right? So you have to really know that delicate line, but it's a powerful tool.
So, Nicole, I love your passion. We're out of time.
Oh, that went by really fast.
It went real fast, yeah. So if somebody wanted to reach out to you and talk to you, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so our firm, Gotham Government Relations, our phone number is 516-880-8170. We're located in Garden City, Long Island. We also have a firm in Midtown and a satellite office in DC. And my email address is Epstein, EESTEIN @gothamgr.com.
Awesome. That was great. So thank you, Nicole, for all of that wonderful information. So tune in on December 12th when we'll be joined by Randy Dresner, which everybody knows Randy Dresner, the Executive Director of Violent Harvest, and she'll be discussing how to effectively engage your board of directors. So everybody have a happy Thanksgiving, and thanks for tuning in.
Happy Thanksgiving.